Hello, we're just going to go over the Willy Wagtail photo that I did not complete during our Zoom session. So the purpose of this image was to demonstrate some dodging and burning tools and also how to achieve the same effect over a larger area such as the background. So what I didn't do when I was demonstrating it previously, or why it didn't work, is because I did not duplicate the background. So I'm going to do that first. Now with this image, probably the first thing I would do was to crop the image. Not only would that give a better attention onto the subject, but it will also eliminate some of these areas that really don't contribute to the image. So now we've actually reduced some of the areas we need to dodge and burn. Now to do that, we come over to the left and you'll see the tool which is here. The burn tool is obviously to darken, and it shows like a OK sign. And if I right click on that, I can see the dodge tool, which is a bit like a lollipop, and the dodge is to lighten. So I'm going to use the burn tool at the start. Clicking on that, I can see my brush size, which if I want to adjust that, I can come up to the top here and adjust to make it bigger. Or I can do that with the open and close brackets, so I can click on those to adjust it as well. Now the hardness, this percent hardness, if it's 0, it means the brush has a very soft edge, and as I increase it, the edge of the brush is harder and therefore has a more definite boundary between the brush and the background. So here we can see that as I'm starting to click on it, I'm actually making the changes. Now up here, which is different to what we can do in Lightroom, we can actually adjust the brightness or darkness of each of the tone sections. So I can concentrate just on the highlights, just on the midtones, or just on the shadows. And the exposure allows the degree to which I'm adding that effect. So 100% exposure means that it's the darkest or the lightest possible, depending on whether I'm burning or dodging. And as I reduce that, I'm getting less of an effect. So let's have a look at the highlights. And here I'm going to have a 50% exposure. So I'm just going to have a half the effect of the burning. Now if I want to increase that, I can go up to 100%, but I'm just affecting the highlights. Now to add that effect, I could go to the midtones. Again, now I'm increasing a bit more of the burning effect, or even to the shadows, which is now going to give us a much more dramatic effect. So this is probably overdone in this image, but it's giving you a demonstration of how in this case where we have a really bright overblown foreground, you can burn it to make it more acceptable. Now some of the things that we might like to dodge or to brighten in this image is the steam that's coming off the wood pile and the little bird itself. So I'm actually going to reduce the size of the brush, come up to the highlights. I'm going to take it down a little bit for the exposure, and you can see the effect of increasing the brightness of the bird. So this is a lot of control where I'm only picking the highlights. If I want to have that same effect on the steam to really accentuate that, I'm going to bring down the exposure so it's a little bit more subtle. I've got still using the highlights. I'm going to make my brush much bigger and just spot in parts. Now some of this is a little bit over the top, so we can just undo those. And I'm actually going to then reduce the exposure even more. Maybe reduce the brush and just spot in some little highlights there just to accentuate the steam. Now the background's quite bright and possibly competing with the subject, so I'm going to select the select the background and darken it as a whole panel. So I'm going to do that slightly differently, but to start we're going to use the selection tools that I've shown you before, which my favourite is the quick selection tool, and checking that I have the brush set just on the apply the selection. The plus and the minus brush will either add to the selection or take away from the selection. So in this case we're selecting the background. I'm just going to drag across and you can see it already snaps into place and it follows what it thinks is the line of the subject. Now, if I want to take the steam away from the background selection, I can use the minus. I'm just going to make it a bit bigger, and I'm just pressing on the mouse and dragging it across. And what that's doing now is including the steam as part of the foreground and taking it away from the background. So when I darken the background, it's not going to actually affect that part. So I'm going to use a tool that I used in some of my other demonstrations, and in this case, I'll just move this out of the way. I'm clicking on the layer I was just adjusting. I'm going to go down to the mask, and now I'm going to click on the adjustment tools. I'm going to choose the levels, because this is similar to what we were doing with the dodging and burning, where instead of just using a brush, I can now affect the mid-tones here by changing this arrow, the highlights and the darks. So I'm just concentrating on specific tonal ranges of the image. So in this case, I'm going to use the mask, and I'm just going to clip that mask to the layer below. So I'm clipping this adjustment effect only to the mask, which will be only to the background. So ensuring I've got, if I'm going to use the brush, I will need to have the foreground to be black. Now here, when I change these sliders, you can see now how I'm burning in the background, and I can be doing it just with the highlights or the darks. So that's how I can achieve that same effect overall. Now I've got quite a harsh edge here where I have masked out the foreground to the background. So this is where I would use the brush. So selecting the brush and the black foreground, I will choose a larger brush, make my brush larger to make it a bit of softer, and make sure I've got it on 0 hardness. And now I'm just going to just reduce that border. Now what I can do is, as I have done here, is to reduce the opacity, so that means that my effect is going to be more integrated with the background. So I'm just dotting or just doing little swipes of the brush here to integrate it into the background. Okay, I hope that cleared up the how to approach that particular example with the demonstration I was doing on the Zoom meeting. Thank you.